She went to Australia.
She worked in Australia
to work. That's how badly she felt like she couldn't work in the U.S. anymore, which is crazy.
And now she's back with the Globe, right?
Right. So it's interesting. She's a very gifted writer and stuff. I remember though at the time, because I had gone through a few things and tried my best to keep it very quiet. Joan Ryan is a wonderful writer. She was at the San Francisco Examiner for many, many years. She may still be with them. And she and I had gone through something with the USFL locker room. We all kind of was like an unspoken thing that you just tried to shut up and keep it quiet. You know, do your job. We wanted to blend in. We didn't want people to resent that we were there. Nobody wants to hear about, we're not the story. You know, we've always been trained that way. Yes. Journalists are not the story, and that's why I think it made us all women a little uncomfortable when Lisa's thing happened. She became the story. No one wanted to sympathize. People picked more on all of us because of Lisa Olsen. So I feel badly because I'm not sure how supportive I was at the time, you know, outwardly. I didn't publicly say anything, but I probably could have been more outwardly supportive of her. Whenever there were stories about women, I always thought, ugh, just shut up, you know, do your thing. There was a woman at the Daily Iowan when I was at the University of Iowa whose byline was H. Forrest Woolard. For a couple years I thought she was a guy. And then I realized she was a woman, and I thought, well, okay. And I soon came to learn that she had that byline because she didn't want anyone to know she was a woman. And at that point, you know, I thought, like, wow, is that how it's going to be? We have to, like, hide? But I think it did influence me in maybe somewhat of a bad way, that we did have to be one of the guys to the point where we couldn't stand up. And over the years, I think, you know, we all probably have learned that whatever you bring to the table, whether it's you're a woman, whatever it is, that can be very valuable. And you use that.
Because I use it a lot because I found that men never, when they used to call up a player, they would be really abrupt with the wife that answered the phone.
Yeah.
And what I learned was always write down the wife's name, if they had children, and when I would call up, I'd say, you know, I would know their name, I'd ask about their children, and it's amazing how that just opens up a lot of doors. It really does. Because they're, you know, it's a nicer way of dealing. Men never do that.
How have you guys dealt with that? Either men athletes thinking you're after them, or women being, you know, maybe a little bit threatened by you guys.
I think the one thing I was going to say was that the Lisa Olsen incident kind of influenced me before I was even in the business, because it had me thinking even beforehand that it could be defining how you handle yourself. And she wasn't doing anything wrong, but it put me through the early, how would I have handled that? And I think I was in high school at that time because it already had me thinking towards it. And it also had me thinking how sad it was that eventually she probably, and now as I see it now, you know, probably it being in the paper made it look like she was making a bigger stink about it, even though it wasn't acceptable. It should have been handled quietly. And I think it's unfortunate that, you know, it probably took on a life of its own that even she didn't want, and, you know, derailed her career, probably her life for a long time. But, yeah, I think the thing about, you know, handling the wives who glare at you when you're walking into the clubhouse or, you know, whatever is, like Cheryl said, I think first of all, the first time I went into a locker room was football. It was the Lions, and I was an intern in that first job. And literally, it was the guy who was at the University of Michigan who shoved me in there, and he was like, hey, quarterbacks and receivers are over here, offensive linemen are here, defensive, and it was like, I mean, and they can all attest to the fact you walk in a football locker room, and man, it is nuts. It is like, it's not like you've got, you know, 10 to 20 guys, you've got 50 plus, and it's crazy, and I learned right away that I needed a pen and a piece of paper.
And a big pad.
And something to write on, and something else to just, you don't want anyone to know that you're, even remotely think you're looking at them. And the humor is a great thing. I have not had, fortunately, the experiences they have. Mine have been very minor, and I'm a very sarcastic person, and at the slightest drop of anything questionable, you know, the remarks, that's the way I treat everyone in my life. I was quick at the funny remarks, and I didn't care if it was in front of someone else because I wanted them to know right away I was not in there for that. The wives is another thing. I would make sure that I tried to smile, and if there was a player there and they were with their wives, I would come over and introduce myself. And, you know, when you ask about their families and let them know that, you know, it's okay to be friendly with them without being,
everything.
it does. And opens them up a little bit and relaxes them, even before an interview, whether it's a veteran or not. We joke about something, it relaxes everything. So there were a number of modes that I would employ. The humor was one, and yes, to learn a little bit about their family and to definitely make sure their wives, knew that you were not after their husbands or the girlfriends. You're still going to get the stares and everything else and people who think you're in there for one reason. But yeah, that's what
I think players have actually evolved a lot.
I
So
agree.
to the point,
Depends on the sport.
yeah,
That's true.
but they're used to seeing women in a locker. It's not like, oh my God,
Right.
like what are we gonna do? I think they're used to it. They know it's coming. It would get old every day to I think nowadays every woman that comes in
Right.
you're harassed. There's not a lot, but I think a lot of times it's other media members who are worse about it.
Yes.
And fans definitely don't understand. When I tell people what I do, I think probably a lot of you can relate. One of the first questions I get is, do you go in the locker room? Oh, what's that like? Are you looking at them? Looking at certain areas of them?
Do you say yes?
I mean, seriously, I'm like,
Yes, I do. Yes,
yeah,
I
no,
do.
I take pictures and I
Yeah,
got
right.
my smartphone going.
When I was in Philadelphia and covering the Eagles, this guy goes on this sports radio guy who's he's all about shock value, but still he went on the radio and said, these women in there are all looking, all these women, and I'm like, there are 3 of us who cover the Eagles, so you're naming me basically and saying that I look at these guys. So I called him out on it, but he wasn't going to change really, and I think Jason Whitlock's the guy who wrote about women shouldn't be in there. I really think players, for the most part now, don't really care and are used to it.
Do you think it's part of their training?
The beer still has some issues because it was just a year ago that Lance Briggs brought it up and was
Yeah.
really sarcastic because of what happened with the Spanish-speaking.
Right.
They just won't let her guard down, something
Mhm.
happens, or a woman unfortunately
Right.
will like her
It comes
behave
up again, and then when it comes up in the media, yeah, and I think.
But I don't think they want anybody in the locker room, to actually be honest
That's
with you.
true.
I don't think they
Right.
want men or
Uh-huh.
women in the locker room
Yeah.
because they look at it as that's
Their
their
haven and-
place, that's where they can do what they want to do.
Wasn't there a vote shortly after the Lisa Olsen incident about, and maybe it's happened several times since, about whether players wanted to be interviewed coming off the field or whether they wanted that 10-minute
Mhm.
period, where it would either be like everyone was out and you were talking to them as they were
Yeah.
coming off. Does anyone remember this?
Well,
I thought this has happened a few times and they voted against it. They
Well,
voted for the cool
unfortunately,
down.
we don't care what they say,
Yeah.
but, no, I mean, really, it's been discussed a million times, let's keep everyone out of the locker room. Because really, the irony of this is that to imply that women are in the locker room for
any other reason than.
for any other reason than our job, it's also implied that men are also in there for another reason.